is threatening to oppose the president's judicial nominees until legislation protecting the special counsel probe is brought to the full Senate for a vote. The senator's threat complicates Republican efforts to move the president's nominees forward by the end of the year. Here's Senator Flake from earlier today.
The improper installation of an acting attorney general who has not been subject to confirmation by this body. The president now has this investigation in his sights, and we all know it.
The Justice Department released this 20-page legal opinion backing President Trump's appointment of Matt Whitaker as acting attorney general, relying on the Federal Vacancies Reform Act. A key issue goes to Senate confirmation, and the Department of Legal Counsel, which provides legal guidance to the federal government, found Senate confirmation is not required if the appointment is temporary, writing, quote, "The constitutionality of Mr. Whitaker's designation is supported by Supreme Court precedent, by acts of Congress in 3 different centuries, and by countless examples of executive practice." Under the Justice Department's succession statute, after Attorney General Jeff Sessions resigned, the acting position falls to his deputy, Rod Rosenstein, who until recently oversaw the special counsel Robert Mueller investigation. The Office of Legal Counsel found the president may use the Vacancies Reform Act as an alternative, which was recognized and used by Presidents Bush and Obama. Earlier today, more reaction on the Hill.
We want to make sure that the acting attorney general does not interfere with the Mueller investigation.
We know how the president feels about the Mueller investigation, but he's never said he wants to shut it down. I've never heard anybody down there say they want to shut it down. I think it's in no danger, and so I don't think any legislation is necessary.
Before the midterms, Rosenstein was under scrutiny over allegations he discussed secretly recording the president in May 2017 and invoking the 25th Amendment to remove President Trump from office. The Republican chairman of the House Judiciary Committee told Fox today that they are working to get Rosenstein under oath for a transcribed interview before the Democrats take over. Shannon?
Catherine Herridge, thank you very much. Okay, so the Justice Department says the president's decision to choose Matthew Whitaker to temporarily head up the DOJ is a legitimate move, even though Whitaker's not been Senate confirmed for this. But the fight to oust him is only getting more aggressive. Joining me now, Republican Senator from Wyoming, John Barrasso, who chairs the Senate Republican Policy Committee. Good to have you with us today.
Thanks, Shannon. Great to be with you.
Okay, so let's start here. The DOJ cites a number of things: SCOTUS rulings, congressional action, past presidential action by presidents including Barack Obama on this front. But the woman who we likely believe will be the next House Speaker again, Nancy Pelosi, says today, she says Whitaker's obviously unfit. Those are her words, and adds the president's action is on extremely dubious legal ground. The president's clearly dodging the Senate confirmation process, installing a political lackey at the helm of the DOJ solely to obstruct the Mueller investigation. Your take?
Well, I think it's a legitimate temporary appointment. He's in an acting role. I think he's going to be that way. I've heard a number of names floated to be the attorney general. I think the president will make a nomination. By the time that hearing is held next year, we'll have 53 Republican senators in place. Rick Scott was with us today, participated in our policy lunch. So we'll have a more breathing room, if you will, to make sure we can get that confirmation done. So I would expect there's going to be a fully confirmed attorney general working on behalf of the United States. Now you take the position of Nancy Pelosi. You know, she's going to be coming in, perhaps as Speaker, perhaps not, depending on how the election goes in the House. I think the Democrats are going to have to decide in the House if they want to legislate, work together to form legislation that actually moves the country forward, or if they want to spend all their time investigating. Is there going to be a tsunami of subpoenas that are just going to try to bog down this administration?
And I think that with the term they use is subpoena cannon, like at the hot dogs and T-shirts that get shot out at, you know, baseball games and basketball games and stuff. So what they're going to say, though, is that's what this House has been doing nonstop with the DOJ, you know, digging into all kinds of things involving Peter Strzok and Lisa Page. So they're going to say, listen, the Republicans spent a lot of time investigating, when they're going to critique and saying there could have been more legislating.
Well, I think this last 2 years has been the most productive legislative period in a long, long time. The economy is booming, more jobs, greater consumer confidence. We were able to cut taxes, get regulatory relief for people, unleash American energy. The number of justices in the Supreme Court, but judges across the land have been increased under President Trump. We have a growing, strong economy, all these things under this leader and under the Republican Senate, the Republican House. But we had to work in a a bipartisan way in the Senate to do water infrastructure, passed 99-1. Opioid legislation, overwhelming support. 22 bills for help our veterans. All of those things are done in a bipartisan way, not through investigations, not through delays and trying to slow down the process. Republicans are committed to working with Democrats if they want to work for results and solutions. That's what I'm committed to.
Okay, something that's going to get a lot of attention is, as the GOP holds the majority in the Senate, is moving through judges. Now, Jeff Flake, one of your GOP counterparts, he says he wants a bill to protect the special counsel, Robert Mueller, and he is going to hold up judicial nominations and votes on them until he gets that. Here's what he says.
I have committed not to advance any more nominees through the Judiciary Committee. We've had hearings for 21. They're awaiting action, some of them tomorrow, and they will not receive my vote. And with the margins we have in the Judiciary Committee, it means that they will not move forward.
Okay, so the measure that did not make it to the floor today, he wants the Senate to have this full Senate vote on this protective measure for Robert Mueller. He's not going to vote on judicial nominees until he gets it. What happens next?
Well, we'll see. Number one is I don't think that vote is necessary on the Senate floor. You heard Senator McConnell talk about the fact that there's been no effort to remove Mueller. It's an investigation. The time has come to end it. It has been dragging on. I heard it on the campaign trail, not just in Wyoming, but other states where I was campaigning for candidates. They said, it's time to move on, get this finished, wrap it up, and move on. The president has made no indication that he was going to remove Mueller from that position. There's been no call for that, so I don't think we need the legislation.
And yes or no, before we run out of time, do you think that whatever report Mueller comes up with should be public? The American public should be able to read it for themselves?
Well, ultimately, I think people ought to hear what he has to say, what he's found. So, yes, but in the middle of the process, while it's moving forward, I think in terms of the integrity of the investigation, shouldn't be dribbling it out as time goes on. We ought to wait till the end, but it's time.
They've been pretty good about keeping a lid on things as we await, and here there may be indictments coming. Senator, thanks for dropping in tonight.
Thanks, Shannon. Thanks for having me.
News alert. One of President Trump's most vocal critics, Michael Avenatti, has been arrested on domestic violence charges. Avenatti emerged as a voice for the resistance after representing adult film performer Stormy Daniels, who said she had a sexual relationship with then businessman Donald Trump, and then the women who claimed they had been victimized by then nominee, now Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh. Correspondent Leland Vittert is tracking the facts on this as they come in. Hi, Leland.
Good evening, Shannon. Michael Avenatti is now out of jail on $50,000 bond in Los Angeles. He denies the charges against him. The Los Angeles Times reports the allegations were made by a woman with visible injuries, including bruises. Clearly, police believed enough of the allegations to book him on felony domestic violence. Here is Avenatti after leaving jail.
First of all, I want to thank the hardworking men and women of the LAPD for their professionalism and their work today. They had no option in light of the allegations. Secondly, I have never struck a woman. I never will strike a woman. I have been an advocate for women's rights my entire career, and I'm going to continue to be an advocate. I am not going to be intimidated from stopping what I am doing.
Exactly what he is referring to by what he's doing is unknown. Avenatti is best known as an attorney for adult performer Stormy Daniels and her feud with the president over an alleged affair during his time on The Apprentice. Avenatti has since taken on cases against Brett Kavanaugh during his confirmation hearings. It's still unclear who the alleged victim in this case is, although TMZ reports the two were involved in a confrontation at Avenatti's luxury apartment building and things devolved from there. In the past few months, Avenatti has floated his name as a 2020 presidential contender. He was supposed to attend two events this weekend for the Vermont Democratic Party. They have canceled those events and are returning people's tickets. Noteworthy that as he left jail, Shannon, Avenatti said he would be fully exonerated, but refused to answer the most basic questions about the incident in question. Shannon.
All right, Leland, thank you very much for the updates. And this Fox News alert, a new fire erupting near Los Angeles. Crews say they've got a good handle on it, but the new one is just about 90 minutes east of two much larger fires. And tonight, we can confirm another death in the Woolsey fire. 500 miles north, first responders are sifting through debris, searching for the hundreds still missing. Correspondent Claudia Cowan is live in Paradise, California, where they've had just absolute devastation. Good evening, Claudia.
Good evening to you, Shannon, and sadly we have another grim update for you tonight. 8 more bodies were found today in the ruins of Paradise, bringing the death toll from the Camp Fire to 56. And the number of homes destroyed in this fire just soared. 8,650 homes gone. The total number of structures destroyed, 10,321. And sadly, 130 people, almost all senior citizens, remain unaccounted for, and relatives fear the worst. Tonight, many of the deceased, like 48-year-old Jesus Fernandez of Concow and 63-year-old Ernie Foss of Paradise, are being remembered as kind neighbors and loving parents. So far, 47 of the victims have been identified. Today, California Governor Jerry Brown got a look at some of the damage, touring what's left of an elementary school in Paradise. Later, he and top federal officials met with first responders to get briefed on what's needed right now. They're looking to bring in mobile homes, a temporary hospital, and portable classrooms. The help cannot come soon enough for 52,000 evacuees, the unhealthy air adding to their anxiety. FEMA Administrator Brock Long says Paradise won't be rebuilt the way it was, and that everyone will have to work together to find a new normal. Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke was here as well, and he said that he hopes that the Camp Fire will lead to significant changes in forest management policy. He said that this kind of loss and devastation is just unacceptable. Shannon.
Claudia Cowan, thank you very much. Live on the scene there. Or down to the wire in Florida tonight, a recount deadline just hours away from right now. Control of a major governor's seat in a presidential swing state is hanging in the balance, along with a potential Senate pickup for a slim GOP majority.
Probably a couple of hundred people, tables, space for the canvassing board to work, and we'll need observers, we'll need folks from representing the candidates.
Dueling lawsuits in court today. So what happens next? A couple of veterans of Florida election battles join us live, so stick around.
3 p.m. tomorrow afternoon. But tonight, a puzzling situation being looked at by federal investigators into alleged doctoring of voter information, allegedly by Democrats. At issue, a letter received by Florida voters all about mail-in ballots. If something doesn't match on those ballots, voters are sent a cure form to clear it up and get their vote counted. Well, in the days after Election Day, some voters received cure forms in the mail with altered due dates 2 days after the election, when these forms would not be accepted anyway. Broward Elections Chief Brenda Snipes, heavily criticized as it is, acknowledges they received such forms, but since they were late, they simply weren't counted.
We did not accept them.
But since it's a crime to alter anything like this, shouldn't you still have reported it to Secretary of State?
Even if they weren't successful?
Yes, that's a good point.
Well, looking live inside Broward's recount operation tonight, the machines are humming with ballots from Election Day so that they can finally be recounted. Broward's already finished all early and mail-in vote recounting and expects to finish it all in the morning, well ahead of the deadline. In Palm Beach County, not expected to make the deadline. It has outdated machines, some malfunctioned last night, losing a full day of recounting that had to be repeated overnight. All day long, our photographer inside saw zero activity at all without any comment about why.
You know, we didn't anticipate that we would have to run 100% of our ballots through these old machines. We anticipated we would have a pretty quiet midterm election as we used to. I guess that's not the new norm.
In Florida Senate race, Republican Governor Rick Scott leads incumbent Bill Nelson by just 0.14%. That means that race will almost certainly be headed to a hand recount, which will be due to be done by Sunday. Shannon?
The fun never ends. Phil Keating, live in Florida. Thank you very much. Okay, let's bring in two people very familiar with Florida election battles. Democratic strategist, former director of the Obama campaign in Florida, Steve Schale, and former Republican National Committee lawyer during the 2000 Florida recount, Alex Vogel. Welcome to you both.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Okay,
thanks, Shannon.
I want to start with something from Terry Rizzo, who's the chairwoman of the Florida Democratic Party. She's talking about the fact that Palm Beach County, very doubtful they're going to make this 3 p.m. deadline tomorrow. They've had some machine malfunctions. They've had other problems, and they said up front, probably not going to happen. This is Ms. Rizzo today.
The deadline is arbitrary, as we know, the deadline now, and it should be extended to accommodate all voting. And we firmly believe that. And we believe that this process will move forward in a proper fashion.
All right, Alex, an arbitrary deadline, why not change it?
There's nothing arbitrary about the deadline. This entire structure of Florida election law was put in place after the 2000 recount to try and address some of these issues. The truth is there's a hard deadline required by law, not just for this recount, but for any election in Florida. There's a hard deadline for any potential hand count and a hard deadline to certify. They're not arbitrary, and they need to be met.
Okay, I want to play a little bit of something from former Florida Secretary of State Katherine Harris, who obviously made plenty of headlines during that big 2000 recount battle. Here's what she's saying today.
All I'm saying is what's crucial is that if they start taking it up in the court case, there are unintended consequences that occur. Those well-established laws have been written. They should follow those laws. And then next year, if they don't like it, they can change them.
I mean, Steve, what about that? These are the laws that are on the books. There were changes after 2000. Why shouldn't these be applied to the current recount?
Well, I mean, first of all, for the most part, the process is working pretty well. In probably 66 counties out of 67, we're going to see results tomorrow. In Palm Beach County, the problem is they have machines that are 11 years old, which are certified by the state. They have 3 recounts they got to go through there, so that's really the challenge there. But for the most part, it's been pretty smooth. Now, there are, as in every kind of case, there are issues that pop up. For example, this issue of vote-by-mail ballots. There are 67 counties that have 67 standards, and I think it's perfectly reasonable to ask a judge whether that's truly equal protection or not. But in the end, I'm pretty confident that we're going to have a result by Tuesday.
All right. An interesting piece in the Sun Sentinel had this to say about both sides. Both sides accuse the other of stealing the election, though for different reasons. Democrats insist all legal votes be counted, but Republicans believe they're counting more than just legal votes. Alex, when the dust settles, do you think both or either side will be confident that they really got the will of the American people in those votes reflected in the wins, whoever wins these 2 races? And I know that there are others at stake, but the 2 big ones we're talking about.
So, first of all, I think this is really important. I think Steve will actually agree with me on this point. I don't believe, especially in this Senate race that we're talking about, that the outcome is in doubt. We're talking about 12,000-plus vote margin that the governor leads by. There hasn't been a recount in modern history anywhere that's changed by more than 500 votes. So that's number one. Number two, and really important when we're talking about the desire to make sure that the people respect and believe in the outcome of an election, what Governor Nelson and folks in D.C., lawyers on his behalf, are doing, which I really am troubled by, is actually trying to undermine and change the very election laws of Florida that were put in place. If you don't like the election laws, there's a process to change them. There's legislation. The idea that they're going to come in now because they're not happy with the result and try and change those is what I think is really threatening to people's confidence in this process.
Yeah, I mean, a number of lawsuits, you all know, on both sides. Some of them, the candidates aren't even parties to them, and so some feel that they're being exploited by outside parties. But the Attorney General, Florida's Attorney General Pam Bondi, tonight talking about criminal investigations. You know, Phil talked about the allegations that there were dates changed on affidavits. There's an allegation by a Politico reporter that he heard a voicemail that somebody was called and asked if they wanted to clarify or change their date well after the time that would have been legal. I mean, Steve, there's a lot to unpack here. And do you feel people will have confidence when it's done?
Well, frankly, I think it's on folks like us. I mean, you know, there's a huge bridge between just malpractice and fraud. And at this point, I mean, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement said there's no fraud. The Division of Elections has actually put staffers in Broward County this entire election cycle. So either the division employees are lying and saying there's no fraud, or they're complicit in it. And frankly, I think we all have to be very careful in the language we use here. Are there problems that have popped up this election? Absolutely. Are they limited to South Florida? No. We have a supervisor of elections in Bay County in the Panhandle, which accepted ballots by email against an explicit order of the governor. These are things that have popped up that are problems. But by and large, this election's been run pretty smoothly. The recount's been pretty smoothly. I agree with Alex. The outcome's unlikely to change unless in the hand recount of the undervotes in Broward, it turns out there's a machine read error. But I think the best thing we can all do is try to provide confidence in the process so that when we have a winner in the end of this thing, we can all kind of come together and say, hey, it worked, and let's move on.
Yeah. Well, the next milestone is that 3 p.m. Deadline tomorrow. We'll see who makes it, who doesn't. And as you said, Steve, 66 out of 67 counties looks like they're going to make it. We'll see what happens in Palm Beach. Steve and Alex, thank you both very much.
Thank you.
All right, more on the allegations against Michael Avenatti. He's speaking out, denies all the claims. Tonight's power panel is here to weigh in, and he's a pioneering neurosurgeon and current cabinet secretary. But Detroit school leaders say they no longer want Ben Carson's name on a school there because they don't like President Trump. What they're doing tonight to strip Carson's name off a leading science high school. Press suspension is going to be successful. That happened during a wide-ranging interview with the Daily Caller. And the White House responds to CNN saying this, quote, the president and White House possess the same broad discretion to regulate access to the White House for journalists and other members of the public that they possess to select which journalists receive interviews. And in a friend of the court brief, Fox News has joined the CNN case. Fox News President Jay Wallace saying Secret Service passes for working White House journalists should never be weaponized. Well, tonight, a high school named after famed surgeon and current Housing and Urban Development Secretary Ben Carson in his hometown of Detroit is seeking a name change. One school board member saying Ben Carson High is synonymous with having Trump's name on our school in blackface. Let's discuss that with tonight's power panel. Democratic strategist and Fox News contributor Leslie Marshall, the Daily Caller's White House correspondent Sagar Enjeti, and White House radio host at WMAL in Washington, Larry O'Connor. Welcome to all of you.
Hey, Shannon. Thanks for having me, Shannon.
All right. Now, the Detroit News reports on this. They say board member Lamar Lemons had pushed to rename Carson School, which is named after the Housing and Urban Development Secretary and former Republican presidential candidate who graduated from the district. He said residents don't support the Trump administration. So, Larry, by the way, you should know that's not the only other name. They're also talking about taking the school name off of a noted abolitionist and former slave Frederick Douglass.
Yeah. Because he was a Republican, maybe? I don't know. You know, I got to tell you, this drives me crazy. I'm from Detroit originally. I still have family who lives in the Detroit area. I go back there a lot. The last thing Detroit needs is to focus on this. It's amazing that they don't have other higher priorities at the school district in Detroit to worry about. The fact of the matter is that every child in the Detroit school district should dream of achieving what Ben Carson has achieved. He is a perfect role model for the children of Detroit. And the fact that they're letting today's politics get in the way of the important values and principles that Ben Carson upholds is despicable, and it disgusts me that they've done this. I love Ben Carson, and I love the city of Detroit, and this breaks my heart.
Well, and Leslie, you know, a lot of people know his story. Not everyone does, but I mean, his mother was illiterate and raised him alone with his brother, and they both have gone on to be these extraordinary overachievers. I mean, he has set records and made history in the field of neuroscience and neurosurgery. They voted 6-1 to start this process of removing his name, but they're going to have public hearings. How do you think it ends?
Well, first of all, because the community is not pro-Trump, and they do associate Ben Carson with Trump and being a part of this administration, I think the name is going to get changed. I would say he has succeeded well beyond many of us, myself included. But the people, the parents, I feel, especially as taxpayers, have a right to say, look, we're uncomfortable with the name of a school. And like you rightly mentioned, Shannon, he is not the only name that they're looking at removing from the school. And I think it's great that the board is going to
but aren't they wrong?
Input, but I think
Leslie,
the name
can't you say that they're wrong? I mean, I know they have the right, Leslie, but can't you say, no, this is wrong?
Well, no, I don't think it's wrong, Larry. I think that they have a right as a community.
Yes, they have a right, but they're
they
wrong.
want their children entering and having the name above the door to reflect.
Well,
that's sad.
I want to bring Sagar in here because
I don't think so.
Listen, Sagar is at the White House every day. He knows how heated the political conversation has become. What do you make of this? I mean, he is somebody that all of us should want our children to aspire to, accomplishing anything sort of anywhere near the realm of what he's done. But Sagar, you know how heated the political environment is. is now.
That's right, Shannon. And one of the things that we see here is that it plays into one of the major conservative fears that Republicans are literally going to be erased from polite society. And that's what one of these efforts is. And it's especially concerning to all of the potential people who would work for the Trump administration. I can't tell you how many that I've spoken with who would have worked for the Trump administration in completely apolitical jobs. We're talking about in the CDC, working towards the benefit of the nation, but they're afraid that just working for the Trump administration makes them completely ineligible to be in polite society. And that's a dangerous time whenever that's taking place in the United States government.
All right, I want to get you all the way on word tonight of an arrest for Michael Avenatti on domestic violence charges. Here is what he is saying tonight as he's released on bail.
I am looking forward to a full investigation, at which point I am confident that I will be fully exonerated.
Larry, innocent until proven guilty. He says it's an absolute fabrication and an attempt to destroy his reputation.
Yeah, it's pretty rich, isn't it? I was under the understanding that women don't lie about these things and women should be believed, and I believe her and all those things. The fact of the matter is the only reason we care about Michael Avenatti is because he was thrust into our living rooms because 90% of the media in this country believed that he had the goods on Donald Trump and therefore he was a hero. I don't think he's a heroic figure. The fact of the matter is there is a woman in this case who allegedly has suffered horrible trauma. Her story needs to be respected, and I think the fact that he is such a clown show and such a circus and is part of our daily conversation is a real shame. And I hope that she gets justice, whatever that is.
Okay, well, obviously there's going to be all kinds of potentially court proceedings and things that will be fact-finding in nature. He will have an opportunity to defend himself and innocent until proven guilty. Reason.com had a piece up tonight that says that Avenatti now finds himself in the position of needing us to avoid reflexively believing the victim is somewhat ironic, of course, given that he likely participated in a scheme to derail the nomination of Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh with dubious sexual assault allegations.
That's right.
Leslie.
Well, to Larry's point, and I agree with some of what Larry said, I always say I'm a woman first before I'm a Democrat. Actually, 90% or more of claims by victims, male or female, are accurate. So, you know, you're talking about between 2 and 10% of the claims are fraudulent. He is innocent until proven guilty. Everyone who is accused is innocent until proven guilty. And I tend to believe the victims. But until we find out more as to the relationship of this victim, and he is denying it, just like others have denied it. I think we have to let all of the information and the facts play out, and I think we should do that in every situation.
Mm-hmm. And Sagar, I mean, his name has been bandied about. He's even entertained the speculation that he would run in 2020 for the Democratic nomination to be president. But during the Kavanaugh hearings, when he added on now, and he's been referred for potential criminal charges, he and Julie Swetnick, one of the women he was representing with allegations against Brett Kavanaugh, we'll have to watch that as well. But there were Democrats who wanted to distance themselves from him, saying like, yeah, listen, we don't want him to be the representative of our party. We're not getting on this bandwagon. But Sagar, he's put his name out there as potentially being a political player.
He has. He's even embraced some of the far left proposals, such as Medicare for All. And it's something that he wants to solidify himself as the only choice of the current resistance. And I'm very interested to see how Michael Avenatti's resistance base will handle these allegations against him, especially given the way that he treated Brett Kavanaugh. As for those of us, in the press, or at least in the honest press, we'll be evaluating the claims against him just as we did against those with Brett Kavanaugh and those with scrutiny. And he's going to be happy that we're giving him the scrutiny that he did not want to extend to Mr. Kavanaugh.
Good point.
And there is no reason to abandon due process on any of these cases. We have to be consistent if that's what we want to say.
But he did not afford that to Kavanaugh.
Well,
let's be clear here.
He will get that now.
Yes, he will.
Okay.
And I'm sure he's very pleased about that.
Larry, Sagar, and Leslie, thank you very much, all of you. Great to see you.
Thanks, Shannon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, despite allegations, the caravan is a non-news story. The first wave of migrants has apparently reached our southern border. What they're doing in Tijuana, what their next steps are, and what Defense Secretary Mattis told our troops along the border today. Mike Donovan's company is helping the law firm who represents the migrants, and he's here along with Lieutenant General Jerry Boykin. They'll weigh in on the Kavanaugh News after the break. Hundreds of migrants in the caravan traveling through Mexico have reached Tijuana at the U.S. southern border in California. Also today, the president's defense chief and Homeland Security secretary paid a visit to the border. Here's correspondent Trace Gallagher with details. Hey, Trace.
Shannon, the two primary Central American caravans making their way through Mexico still have between 4,000 and 7,000 people and are still about 1,000 miles from the U.S. border. But for the second day in a row, smaller segments of the larger caravan began arriving in Tijuana. About 350 migrants yesterday, another 300 or so today. Most went directly to the border to celebrate. Some climbed the fence and taunted Border Patrol agents. Others stayed along the fence line. Some even went down to the beach. They all appear to want their presence known to both immigration authorities and the media. Watch.
Dura, papi. Puro dura, puro catracho.
Contracho is slang for Honduran. It's unclear if these migrants will begin the process of applying for asylum or just try to make their way into California. U.S. border authorities are now shutting down some traffic lanes leading from Tijuana into San Isidro and Otay Mesa near San Diego, and are putting up infrastructure to, quote, harden the border, including razor wire and barriers. But in San Isidro alone, 40,000 vehicles and 34,000 pedestrians cross the border every day. Slowing that flow could hurt the economy. Meantime, 8,000 U.S. troops have been mobilized to the U.S. border. 5,400 have already arrived. Another 2,400 are expected in the coming days. Today, Defense Secretary James Mattis met with military members in McAllen, Texas, and later said there should be no contact between the troops and those in the caravans.
The DoD, the Department of Defense missions do not involve military personnel at this time directly participating in any law enforcement. Law enforcement is left in the hands of the Customs and Border Police.
Once the migrants begin showing up at the border by the thousands, it remains unclear where they will stay during the asylum application process. Shannon.
Trace Gallagher in L.A., thank you very much. So let's break down the caravan news with CEO of Nexus Services, the company funding the law firm representing the migrant caravan, Mike Donovan, and former Deputy Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence, retired Army Lieutenant General Jerry Boykin. Great to have both of you with us tonight.
Great to be here.
Okay, so we have this video that we want to show. This is some migrants scaling a wall and arriving in San Diego. This is what Fox 5 there in San Diego is reporting. They say people on the Mexican side of the border could be seen climbing the fence near Borderfield State Park Tuesday afternoon after part of the Central American migrant caravan arrived in Tijuana. Several people scaled the fence. You can see them there sitting on top of it. A few jumped or crawled to openings in the fence onto U.S. soil. Mike, we were told they're not going to be here for a while, and this is not a legitimate thing.
Well, the caravan is absolutely a legitimate thing, and it's appropriate for us to all pay attention to it. We've had investigators embedded in the caravan, so I understand that this group that broke off is a large, several dozen members are LGBTQ, escaping persecution in their home countries. LGBTQ folks in Central America have a hard time because police oftentimes are also gang members. The gangs are very anti-LGBTQ. So this is we know thousands of people have been granted asylum in the United States because of LGBTQ-related persecution. So we know this is legitimate. Now, these folks come to the border. They don't know what to do in many cases, but they are making themselves known, and I think we should appreciate that. I mean, they're not crawling across and hiding. They're making themselves known, and they're trying to effectuate a process that this president and this administration has made very difficult by saying you have to go to very specific places. Migrants coming don't know where to go. It's a very confusing thing. And when you add them to the mix, putting thousands of troops on the border, militarizing our southern border, it's an incredibly dangerous thing.
Well, and just, so we're clear, they cannot take on a law enforcement activity at all. All they can do is work in a support capacity. Now, part of this lawsuit that you all are supporting, this is from some Honduran migrants and representing their children as well who are on the way here. You say this, or the lawsuit says this: Trump's professed and enacted policy towards thousands of caravanners seeking asylum in the United States is shockingly unconstitutional. President Trump continues to abuse the law, including constitutional rights, to deter Central Americans from exercising their lawful right to seek asylum in the United States. General.
Well, first of all, there's a lot of things wrong with this.
With the lawsuit, with the claims?
No, not with the lawsuit. I don't even, I'm not a lawyer. I can't answer that. But what I can tell you is, as a grandfather of 6, how do I, as a grandfather, teach my grandchildren to respect our laws, to respect our law enforcement when we have a spectacle like this of people taunting our law enforcement on the border and flaunting the fact that they're breaking our laws? How do I, and I understand this whole thing is an issue of compassion. But let me tell you, Monday was Veterans Day. How about a misplaced compassion that ought to be placed on these veterans that have served this nation so honorably and that can't get a colonoscopy at a VA hospital because of a substandard medical care? That should require some attention and compassion by the same people that are out here advocating to let these people into our country and break our laws.
Are you saying that it's a financial issue? Like if we're spending money on people come here seeking asylum or illegally, that those funds aren't going to people like our own vets?
That's exactly what is happening, Shannon. I mean, it's a matter of priorities in terms of spending, but it's also a matter of priorities in terms of compassion. Where's the compassion for these veterans that really need our support here in America to make sure they get the kind of care that they need?
And Mike, how do we balance this with having borders, having a rule of law so that people can come here and get the protections that they need legitimately? I mean, the New York Times reporting today, 800 are already at Tijuana, and they say thousands are expected to arrive in the next several days. I mean, this is going to be an overwhelming situation.
Well, I have a company that employs hundreds of people. In general, we hire veterans. We provide great quality benefits for veterans. You can do both. You can support veterans and support the rule of law. We have a law that says that you can apply for asylum in this country, and there are constitutional rights around due process. These migrants have them. I think you can do both. And I think
if they're not yet on U.S. soil, though?
Yeah, if they're not yet on U.S. soil, but they plan to seek asylum under U.S. law, then they have due process rights under U.S. law. And I know a lot of people have been confused about this, but it's a very clear thing. The law, the INA that relates
so why
to...
wouldn't everybody coming here saying, I'm coming for asylum? I mean, everyone.
Because it's an great question. It's an arduous process. The first thing you do is go through a credible fear interview. So you get detained, and then you go through a credible fear interview with an asylum officer. That is an individual who works for the Trump administration. And only when that fear is determined credible are you eligible for release. There's a lot of rhetoric around this, Shannon, that's not true. People have to understand that these migrants seeking asylum go through a long, arduous process to get it, and we should allow and honor that. We shouldn't change it, and the president shouldn't be changing it with proclamations. It's not constitutional.
Mike, General, good to have you both.
Thank you so much.
Some changes in GOP leadership in the Senate today, the House side as well. Who's climbing up the ladder? We're going to tell you right after this break. Criminal justice sentencing laws in a generation officially has the support of President Trump. Correspondent Garrett Tenney has more on the first bipartisan STEP Act and some new GOP party leadership today.
Shannon, we do. Good evening. Good to be with you. This bill goes beyond just prison reform to changing sentencing guidelines that put people behind bars in the first place. And given its cross-aisle appeal on Capitol Hill, it is the first major piece of legislation announced by the White House since the midterms.
Very much tougher on the truly bad criminals.
After months of wavering, today President Trump threw his support behind a compromise bill, which will shorten mandatory minimum sentences for nonviolent drug offenses, change the 3 strikes you're out penalty from life in prison to 25 years, and end the disparity between crack and powdered cocaine possession. Many of the points echo demands from Democrats over the past few decades, but the bipartisan nature of the First Steps Act seemed lost on today's leadership elections on Capitol Hill, where Chuck Schumer won another term leading Democrats in the Senate.
The American people voted for Democrats last week on the strength of our ideas.
Democrats will control the House, and newly elected Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy started his tenure playing defense.
If their agenda is simply investigations, impeachment, and not focused on the hardworking American public, we'll be there to defend the American public.
Steve Scalise will continue as whip, and Wyoming's Liz Cheney will be third as conference chair, a job once held by her father, former Vice President Dick Cheney.
My father has a real love of this institution, a love of the House of Representatives, and it's a love that I share.
No real surprises today. The question remains, though, who will lead the Democrats in the House? Nobody has stepped forward to challenge Nancy Pelosi. Some Democrats, though, say she may have a serious problem getting the votes for the job, since a lot of those who were just elected campaigned for change against her. Democrats will make their selection 2 weeks from today, so that'll be interesting to see.
Many of them publicly saying they're not going to break that first promise they made to the people who elected them. So we'll be watching closely.
We will.
Garrett, thank you. All right, time now for our Midnight Hero. This one goes out to a couple of St. Louis pups, one named Star and her puppy, Elsa. When Star's kidney began to fail, her only option was a transplant, but just like humans, dogs need a perfect match to get a new organ. So Star's own puppy stepped up to the plate. Both pups are on the mend and expected to live long, healthy lives. So there are heroes, and really the ones who performed that transplant and made sure those little puppers are doing great. You're our heroes tonight. Most watched, most trusted, most grateful you spent your evening with us. Good night from Washington. I'm Shannon Bream. Stick around for the one and only Tucker Carlson next.